folks, it's Chris Nichols here. Welcome back to another video from the Camera Store TV. You know, the Fuji X100 was a beautiful camera, but of course it always begged the question, well, that fixed lens, when are we going to change it? When are we going to do interchangeable lenses on a high-end rangefinder? And the answer is now. This is the brand new Fuji X Pro1, and we are going to take this camera through a field test today. And although it's pre-production, it's very close to final. So much so that Fuji has allowed us to show you folks at home photos and video from this camera. So we're going to do that today. We're going to do some nice street shooting tonight and just get some low light tests and get some street shooting, which a rangefinder camera like this really suits. So come along with me and let's see what we get. Now, of course, the huge change on this camera is going to be this interchangeable lens mount system. And Fuji have made a brand new X mount that they've called with 3 brand new lenses. Now, Fuji and On have actually been famous for making lenses. They make Hasselblad lenses. They're very, very good quality. And, you know, the X100 had the 35 f2, which is brilliant. And it was no exception to the quality of their glass. But they now have a 35mm 1.4 for the X Pro1. Very fast, common 52mm thread. That's going to be a very, very nice lens to use. They've also got a nice f2 18mm wide angle, and they have a 60mm 2.4 macro. Now, it's going to give you a nice thin depth of field for portraits, and it's also going to give you 1:2 macro. Now, remember, this is all coupled with an APS-C size chip, so you're going to have that 1.5 crop factor onto those lens focal lengths. And I really like that Fuji's kept the cost on these lenses very, very affordable. So that's going to be a nice benefit as well if you want to get a whole kit. I mean, a street photography camera like this suits fast primes, and Fuji has not disappointed us. The Fuji Corporation are no strangers to modifying sensors to get better results. Things like their Super CCD, for example, were very, very heavily modified and gave beautiful dynamic range. And of course, they have the EXR chip evolution of that. And then the latest sensor you'll find in the X Pro1, which is a new modified EXR chip. Now, the X Pro1 is missing the anti-aliasing filter in front of the sensor, and a lot of cameras like the Leica M series digitals have also done that. It gives you very, very sharp results, but it can also cause issues with things like moire. Now, you've got to either deal with that in software in camera or on the computer, or you can do what Fuji did. Take the sensors, get away from the standard column of red, green, blue, green, and randomize the structure more so. By doing this, we largely eliminate moire. It shouldn't be as big of an issue, and yet we still get the sharpness advantage of no anti-aliasing filter in front of this sensor. It should promise to be very, very cool. All right, now we've got a perfect opportunity to try out the macro function on this X Pro1 with this 60mm 2.4. Now, the sensor in here is 16 megapixels, which gives us a lot of resolution if we need to get closer. We don't have image stabilization, so I am going to have to be steady, but I have cranked my ISO up to about 1600 here, and Fuji's have always done very, very good with high ISO. We've got beautiful structures here. Now, one of the other things you're going to notice here in this live viewfinder is we have an adjusting frame line for the focal length of our lens. Here's a really, really cool function though. On the X Pro1, I could flick a switch, and that would let me go from a digital display to the optical with digital overlay. Now, this is really cool. Using the 60 right now, my viewfinder is quite small. You know, I'm looking like a tiny box to frame. Well, I can pull this switch back here, hold it down for a second or so, and I now get a new magnifier that actually magnifies me in closer with my own eye to get a better viewfinder for this macro. Let's give this a try here. Now, of course, with the parallax correction as well, it's easy for me to make adjustments here and get the frames that I want. If I want to get really close here, I can simply put the camera into macro mode, and that'll let me focus closer than the autofocus would normally do. Now, that is something that the X100 also had. If you do want to focus really, really close, let's say within a meter, you do have to switch over to the macro mode. It's not my favorite feature, but it does work as long as I stay conscious about it. Now, one of the coolest things about the X100 was that hybrid viewfinder, and they've brought that into the X Pro1, although I think it looks bigger and brighter on this camera. Now, of course, the cool thing about this new interchangeable lens system is as we change our lenses, it actually updates our frame lines. We get that automatically now. We don't have to worry about a fixed lens. And of course, it also gives us parallax correction. But I can even go in the menu and program in whatever pretty much focal length I want. So if I want to adapt like M glass, for example, I can still put that on here and at least get the appropriate frame lines. Now, of course, you got the same toggle switch when we need to go to the digital display. And of course, that does give us completely accurate shooting with no parallax issues. So that's a nice option too if we were going to use, for example, other lenses than the Fuji's. But I can also hold this down, and I can get a magnifier when I'm using that hybrid viewfinder. I can zoom in visually, get a higher magnification if I need more detail, or maybe I want to go out wider so that I can see what's going to come into the frame, for example. Very handy when you're shooting on the street. It's a nice touch, I love it, and again, very easy to implement. All right, we are in my lotto once again, and we're shooting video right now as you're watching it on the X Pro1. Now, the video mode of the X Pro1 is not super exciting. We are getting 1080p video, and I'm sure the quality on the sensor is going to be beautiful, especially in low light like this. But we're only getting 24 frames per second as a frame rate. And, you know, you're not going to get any manual control on this camera for video. The manual focusing is not amazing. It is by wire, and very much like the X100 before it, you do have to turn the ring a lot to get your focusing point. Although I do find it easier to do on this camera, so it's improved. Now, the sound, I don't know, you folks tell me what it sounds like. I can't hear right now, but it's noisy. You're getting a lot of bumping and rattling because it's a lot of NEVA. And, you know, the microphone, this is pretty basic, and no, you cannot put an external microphone on it, so we don't have that option. Still, it's not really a movie-making camera. It's more of a street photography camera. You get some nice quick clips, but it's not going to be a big selling point of this camera for sure. Shut up. Are you getting my windscreen, man? Don't show people that, man. My wipers don't work. It's not my fault. I'm sure it's terribly safe, though. I can see through the cracks here. You think shooting videos in the car counts as distracted driving?
Probably does, yeah. A cell phone, you know.
Well, we got 2 millimeters of steel in case we get into trouble here. We'll be fine. So we're just out here to do some nighttime shooting and see how the camera handles low light at high ISO. But, you know, I've been holding the camera for a while now, and really, I like the controls. It's got a nice feel. It's hard not to make comparisons to the X100 because they do have a very familiar feel if you've used either one. I do kind of like the more retro styling of the X100. This is black, but it's also pretty plain. But, you know, the controls are laid out well. The exposure comp's in a nice spot. I still have that function button that I can customize. I like to set that to ISO settings. The view mode button's been moved over further away from the other stuff. That makes sense, too. You still have this drive button now. You know, on the X100, the drive button was a little confusing because it doesn't do just continuous drive. This gets you into your movie mode, it gets you into your bracketing, your white balance exposure bracketing, all this kind of stuff. And they did it here too. I mean, it still just says drive. Maybe we should say mode or function or something, but what can you do? Otherwise, though, I also like this quick button. We got a quick menu here. Push this up and I can get all my controls here. I can get ISO settings, dynamic range settings, white balance settings, aspect ratio, I mean everything, and it's nice and quick at my fingertips. That really simplifies the menu, keeps it from being confusing, so I like that as well. Overall, it's got a nice grip to it. A lot of people who have held it have said it's a little bit lighter, they feel, than the X100. I think it's pretty similar, but it's a comfortable weight for sure. And you know, when it comes to a camera like this, I know a lot of people think we're getting paid by Fuji. I can assure you we're not. This is just one camera that I really like holding, and Jordan's tried it too. It's really grown on him as well. He's found it to be really functional too. So I would say, honestly, well designed, simple, easy to figure out, comfortable weight, nice grip. I like something a bit more retro, but it's a hot camera. Now a shot like this, looking at it, that kind of repeating pattern could easily give us more array, and I am seeing it in the playback, but I think that was just the rendering because I zoom in here. Even though we've got an anti-aliasing filter on here, it handles that repeating pattern beautifully. I don't see any more array apparent on this sensor. So that's an impressive start. 3200 actually shooting ISO. This camera seems to do a really, really nice job here. Let's just get a shot of some of these sunflowers at nighttime. I'm going to crank the ISO up here. I'm going to go up to 6400. Let's just see what we get. Now, I do find when you're up close, switching over to the digital viewfinder is nice just because we don't have to worry about parallax at all. We get exactly the frame that we wanted. And looking at that, zooming in, man, that is actually very, very impressive. 6400 ISO, maybe a little soft, a bit of pattern noise, but very, very decent. Now, white balance here in auto is, well, it's okay. But it's getting some fluorescent from the sodium vapor. So you know what? Let's try black and white. Let's see what the black-white mode goes. Let's go to my film simulation mode, kick it into black and white. Boom, quick menu, nice and easy. And that looks awesome. Let's take ourselves a shot here. Boom. Nice. Perfect. So we're out here on 17th Ave, and not a lot of people out here, actually, which is strange for this street this time of night. But Oh, we've got a beautiful woman here. Miss, do you mind if I take your photo? Well, she looks drugged. She didn't say no, so let's give it a try here. Nice. High ISO, of course, because it's low light, but it handles it well. We get nice compression on the lens. So yeah, it's a decent portrait range for sure. All right, let's try focusing speed here at night, but also the buffer. This camera can shoot 6 frames per second, which is really quite impressive. I got about 15 shots there before I had to slow down and rebuffer. That's not bad at 6 frames per second. Let's try it again. And again, focusing is actually really impressive, even though it's low light here. Picked up that car, followed it as it went through. It was nice. Much faster for a street camera. And that really does help if you're trying to capture those, facial expressions that happen very quickly or decisive moments. All right, folks, so it's cold. It's getting kind of dark. I think we're going to head home now and call it a day. But, we've been shooting with the Pro1 here, and it has been actually a lot of fun. Really, this is better than the X100 in pretty much every way, shape, and form. It's faster shooting. It's faster focusing. I love the interchangeable lenses. They're faster apertured. The handling feels good. Some of the things that I didn't like about the X100, like the menu things, they've been addressed a little bit. I mean, moving the view mode button, giving us a quick menu, those were smart touches. The styling is clean, and it's very discreet, which is good for a street camera. And of course, we're going to have a lot of other fun lenses that we can throw on here too, like a lot of the other mirrorless cameras let us do. So the viewfinder's improved. I don't know, folks. I'm kind of glad I haven't bought a Fuji X100 yet, because that, I think, is going to be the best street camera that Fuji makes on the market today. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you guys soon.